Christian, in addition to BTK inhibitors, now we have some other targeted therapies being developed in this space, including IRAK4 inhibitor emavusertib. Would you mind discussing the rationale for this combination and what has been clinical experience so far?
Yeah, so the idea is, and I brought this up when we talked about MYD88, CD79B mutations. The idea is, yeah, you inhibit one pathway, but then there's compensatory pathways or any more feedback or input from other receptors. And so it makes sense to use either like an IMiD, because, you know, in addition to a BTK inhibitor or an IRAK inhibitor, a PI3 kinase inhibitor. There is an ongoing study with an IRAK inhibitor in combination with a BTK inhibitor. We have a few patients enrolled, and there seemed to be some added activity in patients that progressed on a BTK inhibitor. So I'm a fan of multi combinations. If it's chemotherapy with a targeted agents or multiple targeted agents. And I do like to hit these tumors upfront hard and then peel off therapy. I don't put my toe into the water, test it first, because that is kind of like this is like a recipe for like creating resistance. But I think that is the future, to find multiple avenues. Again, like for example, lenalidomide, BTK inhibitor, CD20 antibodies. I think that is the way forward. And I think in the upfront setting, we're going to see that hopefully soon too, that patients, particularly elderly patients, 70, 80, 90-year-old, where we have difficulties with maybe getting them to chemotherapy with methotrexate, to offer targeted oral agents that they can easily take at home. And I think that's where the field will head.
Yeah, the trial you mentioned is very interesting one, because it is really focused on patients who are exposed or progress on BTK inhibitors. And I think the early data presented last year at ASH indicated that indeed patients who are refractory to BTK inhibitors with additional IRAK4 inhibition of emavusertib may actually have responses, including deep responses. Yeah. Some CRs were reported. So this really highlights that understanding those molecular pathways and how they can be combined can be really very important for targeting those tumors. Christian mentioned he likes combinations. I think we all like combinations. Do you think moving forward we'll see more like BTK combinations with chemotherapy as well, or IRAK4 combinations with chemotherapy? Or do you think it's going to go like targeted therapies connect on one side and chemotherapy still on the other?
I like the idea of the combination. I think that it gives you an opportunity, because you do need sort of a big punch for the initial disease a lot of times. And targeted therapies, in other tumors, sometimes it doesn't respond as quickly. And again, we want to make these patients as functional as possible. So it could be that you'd start out sort of with your hammer, which is methotrexate-based polychemical therapy, and then add on these targeted agents safely to these patients, and not have to use as much of the methotrexate. Or even though we both espouse that we still use radiation, avoid radiation or other tools that are really damaging to the brain and to other systems. So I think that there's going to continue to be an opportunity. And I love the idea that there will be something that's a rational targeted agent in addition to just the traditional cytotoxic agents that we have.
Now, let's touch bases a little bit on other novel agents in this space as well. So in CAR T-cell therapy definitely revolutionized management of aggressive lymphomas quite a bit, moving to the second line as well. And the primary patients with CNS lymphoma are actually excluded quite aggressively due to concerns of neurotoxicity. But there's more and more emerging data that indeed CAR T-cells maybe can be used for management of CNS lymphoma. Avi, any comments from you on that?
No, I would say we still need more data, but based on the studies that have come up so far, it does seem like a good promising option. I think initially one of the reasons for exclusion from clinical trials was the fact, like you mentioned, was the concern for neurotoxicity. But just based on the data that's coming out and emerging, it does seem like it is being fairly well tolerated in patients with primary CNS lymphoma also. I think what I would like to see is more durable responses. And I feel like we need more data and more studies kind of targeted more towards patients with primarily CNS lymphomas with CAR-T.
Open question to anybody. Is any of you routinely referring patients for CAR T cell therapy in this setting?
I do. In the salvage. Yeah, you try to get them past. There's more and more, especially in the secondary CNS lymphoma, like we had a lot of pushback from our lymphoma group, and everyone was a little concerned about the toxicity. But more and more secondary CNS lymphomas go that route, especially after they have their first recurrence. In primary CNS lymphoma, we try to, if there's no good alternative options, in particular those that have already had a stem cell transplant as consolidation and then a recurrence, where chemotherapy might not be a good regimen. The problem I see, and that is something that's I think obvious, is the time that it takes for collecting of the cells and the product, and that is just too long for our patient population because they deteriorate very quickly. That's why the bridging and what kind of bridging, and I hope that with having more access to local produced T cells, CAR T cells, we might overcome that. So yeah, I'm excited about this too, but yeah, I agree. More data to understand it a little bit better.
I have a better strategy for you. I actually like bispecific antibodies. I come up bypassing the need for action. And the initial results with bispecifics, as you know, in aggressive lymphoma are extremely promising.
Yep.
We don't know if the responses will be as durable with CAR T cells. But the biggest benefit of bispecific antibodies, in contrast to CAR T cells, which has come up, is difficult to combine. You can actually combine them in multiple different ways. So all those targeted therapies or chemotherapy, which we were just talking about, you can combine with bispecifics. And the question is, how well they will penetrate to CNS, which Kathy mentioned. Even for Rituxan is unknown, so we're just learning about the bispecifics. But there is more and more emerging data that indeed some of the patients could be responding to bispecific therapy, and hopefully this would remove this time from, as one of my colleagues, Matt Lanning, calls it, time from brain to vein, right? When you think about the CAR T cells before the infusion happens. So Matt Lanning really gets the copyrights for this one, brain to vein. But that's a problem with the cellular therapies. There have been some studies in the past of the PD-1 antibodies as well. Initially, there was a huge excitement that PD-1 could be really be extremely useful modality in treatment. This has not necessarily fully panned out. Kathy, any comments about it?
Yes, I have not seen. I have not used it in our patient population. And again, I've been less impressed with the outcomes that have been seen using those agents. I think that we all need to take a pause, that in primary brain tumors, we need to maybe understand the biology a little bit more before just throwing a checkpoint inhibitor at it, because I don't know if it's going to translate the same way as it's done for more systemic lymphomas or systemic tumors, or even brain mets, because it is a great drug for patients with brain metastases. So even though it's taking a hold for more solid tumors and for other types of cancers, I think for the primary origin tumors that come from the CNS, it just hasn't made enough of a reliable usefulness for our patients.
Avi or Christian, do you agree? You don't use it in your practices, right? I think
once in a while, like off paper.
Yeah,
it's not interesting because the initial couple of case reports or small case series look quite promising, but I think then the German study basically showed it was quite ineffective in a broader in a larger number of patients. So I don't use it in my practice, but I was curious about what you do. And even as you know, in lymphoma in general, apart from Hodgkin's lymphoma and primary mediastinal large B-cell lymphoma, the activity of PD-1 antibodies is actually quite limited. We never seen much of activity in aggressive lymphomas, or even in some of the indolent lymphomas.
I would say MRD assessments is probably the most exciting thing. So you're targeting treatments through a more individualized approach. I think that I see is probably the most exciting development that's happening in this field. And also development of new novel agents with which we're able to sort of target patients and sort of develop a personalized treatment plan rather than the generalized treatment that we're doing.
Katie, do you agree?
I agree, and I think it's going to be that personalization for the patients that we don't need to do some of the more aggressive therapies. Again, Christian started this off that they're aggressive, at his institution. What if we don't have to be that aggressive? It would be nice to identify people and not have to, hospitalize them as much. And I think really the general trend towards these targeted oral agents is going to continue, and combining them efficiently and getting them to our patients, because not everybody is close to a medical institution or has the ability to be in the hospital for extended periods of time. So I would love to see patients move away from potentially the aggressive inpatient treatments to having something that they can do that's very feasible for them.
Very valid points. Christian?
Yeah, she wants to make me obsolete. Now, I think there's a big point here, and I think that is, if you live close by an expert institution, you just already have changed your prognosis. Because especially again in the elderly patients, there has not been, and we looked at the SEER data, there has not been an improvement of outcome in overall survival outcome in the last 40 years. And everyone else, every younger patient, there's an improvement. And that has to do with access to care, access to specialty care. And that's where, I hope that in 5 years, what we do is there's an MRI scan. We look at the MRI scan, and it has a fancy, parameters, and we can identify it's a glioma or not. Do we need a biopsy? No, we know what it is. Let's give this oral agent, and then the local oncologist, if he's an expert in lymphoma or not, can just do it. And I think that would be perfect. And then also maybe with telemedicine, you can have like a regular checkup with a specialized center that oversees the toxicity and the direction and guides the local oncologist that is not in tune with all the details of a primary CNS lymphoma patient population and studies and results. And I think that might be where this hopefully leads one day. But yeah, it's a way to go. And again, biomarkers will help hopefully to tailor this even more.
So bringing an extremely valid point, because this access to the centers of experience treating this disease is very important. Access to clinical trials of BTK inhibitors, of emavusertib, IRAK4 inhibitors, and others could be very important as well, and potentially altering the discourse for those patients. So that's and as I really like what you mentioned about this hybrid model of care, right? Because you can actually develop that treatment plan, which can be then delivered more locally and make it easier for the patient. And then if there's a change in the direction needed or clinical trial, they can come back to that, to the center which actually specialize in it. So those are all very, very valid points. I think the final message here is that this is the disease which can be treated successfully and can be cured, can be treated with a lot of novel agents and a lot of clinical trials and other developments in this space. So definitely we would like to treat those patients aggressively and approach it as much as we can because in the past there was some negativity about treatment of this disease, but things have really changed a lot over the years, and more development is coming in this space.